I'm Stephen Price.
Hello, I'm Kara Githens.
This is the Innkeepers, a podcast by Sanctuary Inn. At Sanctuary Inn, we believe we are called to equip, refresh, and restore God's global workers.
On this podcast, we will be interviewing guests who have much to teach us about the many facets of missionary care. Let's learn together and be encouraged to press on in the work God has given each one of us to do.
Hi, this is Steve.
Hello, this is Kara, and welcome back to the Innkeepers.
Yeah, we have a little different episode today. We recognize the fact we've been podcasting for just about a year now. And so we're going to take a minute and go backwards and talk about some of the podcasts we've done and encourage you to go back to maybe listen to some of those you haven't caught.
Yeah, we are so grateful for all the different guests we've been able to have on our podcast this year. It's just amazing. Just the breadth of experience and wisdom that we were able to tap into through our different recordings and podcasts. So we want to go all the way back to season 1 and kind of just remind ourselves of some of the highlights there and some of the people that we were able to talk with and kind of what stood out to us.
Yeah, and as I look back through the 3 seasons and the guests that we've had, the people that have been willing to share their time with us, it's just remarkable to be reminded of these men and women that represent such a diversity in missions and just a broad range of mission experience. So, Kara, let's go back to season 1 and tell me something that stood out to you.
Well, in season 1, I was just so honored that we were able to start out with the episode on trauma with Steve Tracy. And it's just, he brought so much wisdom and just honesty and biblical perspective on trauma that I think sometimes is missing in the trauma literature today. So he just really, I think, gave a great tool for anyone who's wanting to learn more about what is trauma, or have I experienced trauma? How do I define it? What do I do? How do I get help? Yeah,
I think I've referred back to that podcast episode in conversation with people many, many times in the last year, as we just as I listen to people's stories and I think about the things that he shared, and whether it was primary trauma, something that happened to the missionary, or secondary trauma, something that they were there. I mean, it may not have happened to them, but that's something they witnessed or experienced or knew about. And so anyway, that's is an episode that I keep referring back to.
Yeah, it's an excellent tool.
Yeah. I think one of the episodes that probably people have listened to maybe more than any other is the one that we titled Clinging to the Sovereignty of God. And that was the story of our friends Dennis and Kasia Beck and their ministry in Poland, and the death of Dennis's first wife on the mission field and his choice to stay on the field for a year after that with 2 small children. And anyway, that's an episode that seems to people have really enjoyed listening to.
Yeah, and I think it resonates with people that life is just full of hardship, and what do we do with that? And their story is just so, I think, effective in conveying our dependence on God in the midst of really, really hard times. It's definitely a must listen if you've missed it.
Yeah, take the time to go back and listen to that one. And I just think as we have had some of these different episodes, I'm just plugging myself here, but Kara and I did record an episode talking about the 5 things your missionary won't tell you. And especially if you're involved in a missions committee or a rope team, as some churches call them, or something where you're really have a personal connection with missionaries, take some time to listen to that, because sometimes the missionaries communicate and they kind of are hoping you'll read between the lines of what they're saying to you.
Yeah, I think we did touch on some key elements in that podcast. Yeah, and then there was just some really good conversations with Dr. Barney Davis about missionary care, and we titled it A Missionary Care Pioneer, because he really is a pioneer in dovetailing mental health issues with missions. By his just perspective on the importance of psychiatry in the midst of missions, and that conversation was really, really good and encouraging. I think it could be freeing for someone who may be struggling with a mental illness and maybe feel some shame or some sense of maybe this isn't okay. I'm a missionary and I'm dealing with this.
Right. And just helping missionaries realize that they're people too, and mental health care is as important for them as it is for anyone else.
Absolutely.
Well, we started sorry, I don't want to jump ahead, because we had a great conversation with Doug Hazen talking about praying for your missionary. Kara, tell us more, because I know you've known Doug for a long time.
Yeah, Doug actually was one of my previous bosses, and I got to work with him when I worked with World Venture, and his heart for praying for missionaries just is in everything he does. And that podcast is super helpful with some really tangible ways and ideas of how we can be effective in praying for our missionaries. And I think that's something that all of us can do. And the tools are applicable not only to missionaries, but to anyone that you are really committed to praying for. I think he just addressed that topic so beautifully.
Yeah, I appreciated the things, and just very practical things he shared there. We started season 2 with a conversation with Lauren Wells, and Lauren, I think, is a name that a lot of people know now, especially in the circles of TCK, or Third Culture Kid circles. She's been doing a lot of speaking and a lot of writing in the area of third culture kids, and she herself grew up as a missionary kid, and so she has a lot to share. And she's just recently published a book to help adult third culture kids.
Yeah, her book on grief, on the Grief Tower, is a really great tool, and she talks about that in our podcast. And if you are looking for good resources to help your TCK or help yourself as you are an adult TCK, or you just want to understand the struggles that missionaries and their families go through, I think it's a great resource.
From there, we spent some time talking to Connie Beefus, and her burden and concern is helping missionaries survive their first term of service. And that is so important, that we equip the missionaries that go out so that they have a successful first term.
Yeah, and she has just a really great book that she wrote, and we referenced that in the podcast, and you can go look for that podcast, Thriving in the First Missionary Term, and uncover a gold mine of resources. Yeah, we also talked, I really found it helpful to talk about the topic of forgiveness that we talked about with Calvin and Julie Tadema. That is just, I find that in my work here at Sanctuary, and there's so many people that are hurting because of unforgiveness in their life.
Yeah.
And that bitterness that grows. And I think that podcast really gave some good insight and wisdom as to how to let go and how to forgive and how to trust God with the outcome of things, and the freedom that comes from that.
Barnabas International is an organization that may be familiar to you, and their specialty is traveling to the mission field to be able to care for missionaries. And it's not always possible for a missionary to travel away from where they are to receive the care that they might need. And so Barnabas International, and the interview with Perry Bradford, gave us some insight into the idea of shepherding the missionaries. And Perry's heart is that of a shepherd, and so he shared about the ministry and the pastoral care and their heart for caring for missionaries around the globe.
Yeah. And I really enjoyed our conversation with Amy Young when we did the Self-Care and Missions podcast.
Yeah.
She just has some just wise words about how to really care for yourself. And that's not a selfish thing.
Right.
That's a healthy thing, to be able to be healthy as a person, to be able to help others.
Yeah.
And that was just a really, I think, good conversation. And she at Global Trellis has so many good resources. If you haven't heard that podcast or haven't heard of Global Trellis, I'd really encourage you to go look into that, because there's so many good resources.
Yeah. Her network, you think about her network and the people that she knows and the people that are working with her, as part of the Global Trellis team. It's amazing, all the different resources. And to remind ourselves that it's not wrong to take care of ourselves, that it's okay to take care of ourselves. And often we are better for it. Having, if we run ourselves into the ground, we're really of no use to anyone.
Absolutely. So then that kind of brings us to season 3. The last several episodes we have recorded. I really enjoy talking with Steve Hardy. He is a family friend who just has traveled the world and trained and equipped trainers of missionaries for the last 30 odd years. And it's just a huge just perspective on the world of missions. And he shares some great stories and some great insights as to what's happening in the missions world today. And I really enjoyed that conversation. And I hope if you missed that one, you go back and take a listen.
Yeah. Kind of the overarching thing for season 3 was we were trying to give more of a global picture of what's happening in missions. And so each of the guests from season 3, that's kind of where we were headed with that. So if you have especially an interest in kind of hearing what's happening in missions around the world, then I would encourage you to tap into those different episodes. Dr. Jolene Erlacher talked about millennials in missions, and she had a lot of great insights and was able to share with us some really great information. And so if you are in a position where your church is sending missionaries that are part of the millennial generation, or you're part of a mission organization and you find yourself not sure what to do with the millennials that are in your organization or wanting to be part of, then it's certainly worth your time to listen to that and to look up her resources.
Yeah, I still need to go back and read her books, because I'm finding, even as I'm on the cusp of the millennial generation, it's really, there is a difference. There's a shift that's happened, and she just has some great things that she shares in our podcast, and I'm sure in her books that I'm going to go read.
Okay. Yeah, Dr. Karen Fancher from Multnomah University talked about cultural humility, and I think that's certainly an episode I think about a lot as well, and just being willing to be to go into a cross-cultural situation not as a person knowing all the answers, but a person who's there to learn and to listen.
Yeah, and we had we had Brian Heerwagen on our podcast twice, once in season 2 and once in season 3, and he just shared a lot of great stories and insight, and both on being a missions pastor and also with short-term missions.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes short-term missions strikes fear in our heart, that phrase, short-term missions. But it's his burden, it's his passion, it's what he does for a living. And so it's really important to him that it's done well and it's done right. And so, there's a lot of great information to be gleaned from that conversation with Brian.
Yeah, and we are, I know, skipping over some other amazing podcasts there that might really connect with a felt need that you have. And I really encourage you to just go through. You can find them all on our various YouTube or our website, or wherever you found this one to listen to.
Yeah.
And go back and scroll back and take a look at all these podcasts, because there's just some, I feel like there's, not because of us, but because of God and what He allowed us to do this last year. I feel like we've been able to build a really good toolbox for people to listen to and learn about missions and the many facets of missionary care.
Yeah, and so if you're a person that's in a local church and working with missionaries, or if you just have a heart for missionaries and want to pray for them and pray in a way that you just, kind of you feel like, oh, this is really a need that my missionary probably has. So just encourage you to take a listen to some of these podcasts, and I think it'll give you a lot of information. And if you just want a better idea of some of the things that are happening in the world of missions today, I think each of these podcasts can help you understand better things that are happening in the world of missions.
Yeah, and if there's a friend or missions pastor or someone who needs to know about our podcast, feel free to share and get the word out there. We plan to be recording lots more great episodes in 2022. It's just around the corner here.
Around the corner.
And we just hope that you really have a sense of we are here to resource you and equip you and help you better care for your missionaries and encourage those who are doing missionary care.
Yeah. You can always communicate with us, Steve at sanctuaryinn.org.
And I'm Kara, Kara, at sanctuaryinn.org.
Yeah, so if there's anything that we can do to help you, and if you have questions about missionary care, missionary rest, and is Sanctuary Inn a place that you could come, or a place that a missionary you know might be able to come, just send us an email and we'll be in touch and we'll be able to talk about that.
Yeah, and our application is actually on our website at sanctuaryinn.org.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know of someone who needs to hear about us, you can always forward our website and have people look into our application, and that's a great way to kind of get the first step towards coming our way.
Yeah. Well, this is Steve.
And this is Kara.
And this has been the Sanctuary Inn, the Innkeepers podcast. So thank you for listening.
And Merry Christmas to you all.
Thank you for tuning in to the Innkeepers podcast. Our mission at Sanctuary Inn is to equip, refresh, and restore God's global workers for kingdom purposes. We hope today's podcast was an encouragement to you, and maybe you were prompted to pass this along to someone you know that will benefit from today's conversation. Creating a podcast is a team effort. Kara and I prepare and do the interviews, and we're grateful for the time that our guests give us out of their busy schedules to help us learn more about missionary care.
We also want to thank Tim Downing for the music that he wrote and performed specifically for the Innkeepers podcast. Tim is a very talented musician, and you can learn more about him and his work at downingkeys.com. Our podcast is edited by Javier Bolanos and is produced by Tim Cowley of Cowley Visuals. If you have media needs, including film, photography, or audio, you can reach Tim at cowleyvisuals.com.
Our website and show notes are prepared by Micah Githens, Kara's amazing husband. You can visit the Sanctuary Inn website and learn more about the ministry of Sanctuary Inn at sanctuaryinn.org. Thank you again for joining us on our journey to learn more about missionary care.
See you next time.